Hi there.
Hi, Katie.
Thanks for being with us. Maybe should we start by, why don't you introduce yourself and then I can introduce myself and we can get into a really juicy conversation.
Yes, I am Eyla Cuenca, and I am a holistic birth guide, childbirth educator, mother, lactation specialist. I just work in the realm of birth and female transitions.
Female transitions. Ooh, I love that. And my name is Katie Hess. For those of you who don't know me, I own a company called LOTUSWEI, and we make flower elixirs and also work with aromatherapy, and everything we make is designed to help people have transformative shifts in their life in a very simple and easy way. Okay, so maybe I'll just start lobbing you some questions. Does that work?
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, just in general, let's start with before pregnancy. What are, speaking in terms of like women's transitions, what would you say in your experience, in your work with your clients, that you see women hitting roadblocks? Like, what are the things, whether it's about pregnancy or just in general, that women are hitting?
I think one of the biggest things that women are hitting, before they conceive, when they come to me, because women do come to me who want to become pregnant, or they're setting an intention, or it's just kind of like coming into their field. And the work that we end up really doing is trying to like piece together consciousness. What I would say is like there's a broken consciousness around selecting a partner, and worthiness around selecting a partner, and like worthiness around what it means to be a mother. And so there's just like a lot, like kind of like this deficit that seems to be pretty loud with a lot of women, and not feeling worthiness around receiving love and giving love, perhaps as a mother. And so what we end up talking about a lot is how to repair that brokenness through healing with our own nuclear family. And that doesn't have to be like, having a conversation with your mother or your father or your brother or anything. That all is like an inside job that can happen from within. And that always starts by learning how to draw boundaries, like simply expressing one's needs. Like, I'm not available for this conversation with you today, mom, or what I'm available for, mom, is a conversation about this and this and this, and that's what I would like to do with you today. So kind of like going to the beginning and rebuilding a vocabulary on how we relate to those in our nuclear family, and how we ask for what we want. Because a lot of these women pre-conception who have this opportunity to give themselves time to heal before they conceive, they really are trying to find a way to express, first identify what they want, and then express what it is that they want and need, and being okay with the outcome. And a lot of women are surprised that when they actually get clear on what they want and express it, they typically receive that very thing. So that's the work that I end up doing. And it's not through like any type of modality besides having conversations and directing them to resources, and holding the space for them as I would for a birth, when I'm working as a doula. And so that's like where that kind of where that lands. I see that being kind of the biggest roadblock. And then when we get closer into the realm of conception and becoming pregnant, then I see the blocks can start to come from not acknowledging that there are certain needs, again, not being met. Like a woman will get involved in the system and allow things to be done to her body that she doesn't necessarily want, but she's never actually learned to vocalize or express what she does and doesn't want.
That's so interesting. Yeah. It's like we need these opportunities to practice. Like someone was saying, like all the different kinds of things that have happened in the last few years, that that some of us have built up muscles by simple things like opting out of the big box at the airport.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm very familiar.
You can get up there and opt out. You don't have to go through the thing. And they say like, well, it doesn't you get more radiation from a cell phone, and it's like, well, maybe, but they used to have different ones and they said those were safe. And in fact, they weren't. So now if you say they're safe, it's kind of like, I don't really believe you because you already told me they were safe and they weren't. So I'm just going to opt out. And then I saw recently, I know I'm kind of digressing here, but I saw recently, I was just in the airport coming back from Charleston, and they've now implemented biometrics in the airports. So when you go up, this is interesting. When you go up to show your license and your boarding pass to go through the TSA security, instead of someone just checking your license as usual before you go through the security line, they're now just simply taking your photo and, taking a scan and stuff. And
Whoa.
yeah, and they don't say anything to you. They just sort of like assume that you'll go along with it. And, you can opt out. So we get up there and we're like, we're going to opt out of this. And they're like, yeah, of course you can opt out.
Yeah,
but no one knows that. So they just kind of go along with it. And they're like, oh, geez, this is like a new process that I need to do.
Oh my God, that is like the perfect segue into like the perfect example and the perfect segue into how women enter into this new rite of passage of pregnancy, and conception. It's like as soon as you find out you're pregnant, the first thing most women do is they'll find a doctor or a recommended OB or an OBGYN, and they'll go get a blood test and an intravaginal ultrasound, to confirm that they're pregnant, because they couldn't trust that, their cycle shifted, and they couldn't trust that their body was now giving them different signs. There was tenderness in the breasts, like they were no longer menstruating, like they couldn't trust that. So they had to go to someone to confirm it for them. And then once you get into that field, they're telling you like, okay, now you're going to do X amount of ultrasounds. Now you're going to go get this other test done, and you just do it. And no one knows that you can just opt out. You could say like, oh, actually, I'm not going to do 8 more ultrasounds. Thank you though, and they'll just say like, okay.
You just swept up into the system, and
yeah,
maybe it's your first time getting pregnant. You don't know what's normal. So they just tell you when the next appointment is, then you just go because you think that's what you have to do, right? That's what everyone's doing.
It's what everyone's doing. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That makes me think of there's a flower that is super prolific in the area that you grow. I remember like sitting under all these trees, like, because it's my only opportunity because we don't have those here. And it's called the Royal Poinciana tree. Sometimes they call it flame of the forest.
I have one in the backyard. Yeah.
Okay, so that's like the perfect medicine for this particular situation. That flower is for asking for what you want and knowing you deserve it. It's like a deep worthiness serum, and it gives you the courage to just ask for what you want, or ask for what you don't want, or just like plainly put it out there and know that people are going to respond really well to it. We have originally I collected this flower in Bermuda, but it's all over Florida.
Yeah, everywhere.
I mean, if you could like sit under the tree for an hour every day and maybe get the same benefit, but if you don't have access to that tree, then you can just take
this is wild, Katie. So I have a tiny home, like a 400 square foot tiny home in the back of the property that's an Airbnb that I rent out to people. And every single person the last 6 years who has come through this Airbnb, which is more than 200 people, has said, after staying in this home for a few days or 2 weeks or whatever it was, I just feel so much more clear on what I want. It's like I've attracted, and it's right under the Royal Poinciana tree. It's like it sits, and I have to get the Poinciana tree cut back all the time because it grows so quickly.
Yeah.
People are always like, I had this woman come after grad school, and she was really lost and didn't know like where to go. And then after, she's like, I just every night started getting messaging about like, I just have to ask for what I want. I have to finally say like, I'm going to get that raise. Like I'm going to, and people share this with me because I'm on the property and, I'm gardening and things. And so they'll come and share their stories with me. And it's the same, like what you just described about this flower. It's really amazing.
That is so cool. Wow. That's really, really cool. You gotta like put that in your Airbnb description.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be healed by the Royal Poinciana. Get ready for your worthiness serum. Wow. Is that in one of the formulas that you create?
Yeah, it's in a formula called Truth Teller.
Oh, that's the one I've been using.
Oh. Well, hey, it's got other flowers for speaking your truth, for transmuting anger and fear into, sticking up for yourself, into not being afraid of saying things that are going to hurt people's feelings, just like letting it rip, just communicating, just saying it, just speaking it. And so much of what we're afraid to say actually isn't a big deal if we just get it out. It's more than just the what happens if.
What happens if it's the consequence, right? It's like, what are the consequences of being a bad girl, and being a bad girl, unfortunately, is associated with expressing your needs. Yeah. So I wonder if the truth teller would be the perfect elixir for many women who are in that process of really wanting to get clear with those around them about how they want to birth and how they want to spend their pregnancy. So many of the women that I work with in pregnancy have this apprehension, like countless women. Oh, we're doing a home birth, but I'm not telling my family, and we're not telling my husband's family. We're just saying we're going to the hospital because we don't want to upset our family, or we don't want to deal with the repercussions. And then they'll birth at home and no one knows. And then later on they tell them, and it's like, see, everything turned out fine. We just didn't want the flack when we were pregnant. And so, there's so many ways to do that. But of course, it's like you're kind of living in a shadow. So the truth teller would be.
There's another one that comes to mind too. If women are looking for like boundaries.
Yeah.
And it has, God, it's got like, this is going to open up a whole other discussion here, but have you worked with luscious embodiment at all?
Yes, a friend gifted it to me for my birthday last year, the set, or the mist, and then the anointing oil. And yeah.
I love it so much because the aromatherapy is so good. But if there's anyone out there who's like looking to set boundaries, I think I worked with that remedy for 6 months straight. And it will just quietly show you everywhere you're leaking energy, everywhere you're being taken advantage of, everywhere you're being too nice, everywhere you're like, yeah, sure, okay, but not really. Don't. And it, it's like sneaky, it's subtle. It's like actually amazing how much we're doing.
Subtle. Yeah.
And it makes you, I noticed that for a little bit of a time period, it made me angry. It was only because it's like in my particular system, for me to make a change, I had to get angry about it. That was like the only thing that would help me set a boundary. So it kind of like fires you up. So let's say for the women who maybe have had uncomfortable birth experiences in the past, and they're going in like, okay, I'm going to like be really strong about this. That could be a helpful remedy. And then it also has squash blossom, which is like the flower for fertility and feeling like, yes, I'm going to be a good mom no matter what, and dissolving insecurities. It's also the flower for dissolving sexual abuse, traumas, or memories, like the charge that's in your energy system. Obviously, we're not going to forget or delete our memories, but it takes the charge off the cellular memory, and really purifies the womb. So I mean, I don't know, how often do you see that either worries about motherhood or sexual trauma, or just like not feeling comfortable in your body would affect fertility?
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot. There are many women who've come to me who've done all the right things, right? They've eaten all the right foods, and they've been taking their temperature before they have sexual intercourse, and they've done all the things, right? Short of IVF. What I've noticed that they have not addressed are any type of trauma that has affected the womb space, right? And that could be something, and it always comes up because if we start to talk, I'll ask about miscarriages, right? Which do create a trauma in that space if it's not resolved. So that'll come up, and sometimes I'll ask about abortions, previous pregnancies, and then that often comes up as well, and it's kind of shrugged off like, oh, I wanted to have that abortion, like, no, it's not a big deal. That was 20 years ago. And however, as we start to unpack it, and I just ask questions about the abortion, not in any kind of judgmental way or trying to like excavate anything, just, trying to get a sense of the context, then the woman starts to break apart a little bit. And I can see that there is a lot of grief that's still being held in the womb and in the heart, right? Because they're connected. So, like that's why a lot of women, when they orgasm, they'll weep, it's like that heart space blows open. And so they'll start to cry because there is a memory there in the womb of that experience, whether or not it was cerebrally, intellectually the best choice to be made at the time, that really starts to blow open. And then if it's not either one of those things, miscarriage, abortion, it could be, something as big as a severe, sexual molestation from childhood, a violation, an assault, or it could be something that seems really kind of like subtle, not a big deal, kind of more insidious in a way, just constantly being, physically engaged with in a non-sexual way when you didn't want to be, as a child, right? Like when you had to hug and kiss family members to be polite, and you had to let yourself kind of be handled in a certain way in order to be a good girl or a good boy or whatever it has been, in this case, a good girl. And so that over time starts to create this callus and this kind of fortress around the womb space and the heart space. And so that's like that's like the big kind of well that I see that is the biggest block in fertility. And it's not so much like, oh, you're not eating enough vitamin A or something, or you're past 35. So women get hung up on age as a factor for infertility, and I don't even resonate or vibe with that belief system. I don't subscribe to it, and I don't engage women with that. So we just try to like remove that belief system to begin with. For me, it's really these blocks, and sometimes women do believe they want to get pregnant, but maybe they're not in a partnership where they feel fully supported. I see that a lot too, where the woman is the one holding the masculine space in the relationship, like, oh, my husband, he doesn't like the sight of blood. He doesn't want to be at the birth. Yeah. Like he's really squeamish about that. And it's like, why are you holding this space for like, as the masculine for like a hysterical type of feminine characteristic and quality,
Yeah,
so
don't men go to war?
like, what I mean? Yeah, right. He's not a Viking. No. So it's like, I see that sometimes it's just a subtle, but really profound imbalance in the masculine feminine dynamic in the relationship that even blocks the womb space from wanting to procreate.
And then what do you do with that?
We just talk about it. There is, I reflect these things back. I reflect back what I hear, right? So if this is being shared, I'll just reflect back what I hear. How does this make you feel? Like, do you, you're seeking support from a doula, you're seeking support from a midwife, you want there to be this team, and where is he, participating in all of this? And it's, we start to notice that there is a deficit there. And so I can make suggestions depending on their particular scenario. I can give the partner some things to try and to do to try to like, regain some balance in the polarity. But these are all the things I like to look at. That's why for me, it's a type of holistic guidance, and so what I've noticed with the flower remedies is like they have been really amazing allies for me in all of my processes. So if I'm moving through, if I'm using a modality like family constellations by Bert Hellinger, truth teller, actually, before I went into a family constellation, I took the truth teller, and it's funny because I was really able, and the sacred awareness. So I actually took both, and I was able to really tap into everyone's grid. Like I was like accessing everyone's grid, and it gave me the capacity to expand and see beyond kind of like what is right here for me, And so
do family constellation work?
What's that?
You do family constellation work?
I'm not a facilitator, but I personally do the work. I do individual sessions with the facilitator, and then I work in a group, and I recommend it to pretty much everyone that comes to me as a student or as a client, because it's gentle enough for most people to engage with it, and the results are incredibly profound, And for people who are not comfortable with talk therapy, this is great, because you don't really have to do much talking if you don't want to. You just have to notice
Mhm. Hmm.
You know?
Interesting.
So
That's so interesting. Gosh, I would really love to find, because we're doing this big event in November, but I would love to find somebody who would want to explore the overlap between the family constellation work and flower essences, because now that we're talking about, I've done a couple sessions with someone in Germany,
yeah,
and was super impressed, and thought the whole thing was very interesting. And I found out some things about myself that I didn't know before. And it's interesting because when I was studying flower essences with my teacher 20 some years ago, he was saying, well, what flower essences are actually doing is they're targeting the information that's in our DNA that's, up to 6 to 8 generations back in our family lineage. So, it's like, well, you have these thoughts and they're private and they're in your own mind, and you think that like you're the only one that can think them and they're very unique to you, and I'm the only one
right.
thinking this. When in fact, it's like probably grandma thought the same thing and great grandma thought the same thing. And I got this from my great grandfather. And we're kind of this mishmash of all these different thought and emotional patterns.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really interesting that, flower essences are targeting that kind of information in our energetic cellular makeup. And so is family constellation work. So it would be really interesting to see how they complement each other.
Absolutely. I may have a great facilitator for you, so I'll share that with you separately. Yeah, I mean, she'd be open to that. And I can see the overlaps myself just by doing both, and so that's really the first modality that I recommend to people, is the family constellation work, and then a lot of work around boundaries. And
Do you think that it's possible that when you're accessing a particular piece of information from a family member, let's say, you could apply a flower essence as a surrogate in that moment?
yeah,
That would be really interesting.
absolutely.
And then obviously it's like we're clearing this way, right? And then we're clearing this way. So I'm assuming that I'm going to assume that you are encouraging moms to do as much healing work before they get pregnant so that they can A, take care of themselves, but B, so they don't pass on any unwanted limiting patterns to their kids.
Yeah, I mean, for us to really wipe that slate clean, right, to completely, how could I say that, like purify the cells in that way, like that memory is always going to be there of that experience, whether it was our great grandmothers or grandfathers or whoever, that memory will be there. But I think what this work is doing is allowing it to come to the surface. And when it's in our awareness, it's no longer creating a discord, right, in our frequency. So it's there and it's part of the makeup, and it actually becomes a tool. So that the trauma becomes a tool. These belief systems, when we're in awareness of them, actually become tools, and they become what we can offer the world. So we have to transmute and alchemize. So I don't necessarily see that we're like getting rid of it. And I don't necessarily think that that's the solution. But it's the alchemy that happens. And I would say that this is an opportunity to do that before you get pregnant, but it's also just like, oh, now I have these tools to go into this transition, right? Because when we have children, it's just like you're walking around with this mirror around you all the time. Like everywhere you look, it's there, and all of this shit comes up, like I'll give you one example with the sacred awareness. It was like before a Zoom call that I did, and it was a breastfeeding consultation. So I do breastfeeding consultations in person or over Zoom, because sometimes we can just figure out what's going on without having to be there. Yeah. Sometimes I like to be in their home and where they're breastfeeding and like really understand the environment. But in this scenario, she basically said, I check out. Like as soon as my daughter wants to, like I really want to breastfeed, like it's my goal, but as soon as she wants to breastfeed, I just check out. And like I just associate, it's like I'm not there, and I just want to like be at Pilates class, and I just want to see my friends, and I just don't want to be here, and I feel so much shame, and I feel so conflicted. So I asked her if she had been breastfed, and she said no. And she said, actually, when I was born, my mom put me with a full-time nanny, and I didn't really have a lot of contact with my mom until I was like around 3 or 4 years old. So what I've noticed, even in myself, like I basically like when I hit age 6, there was like a lot of time spent apart from my parents and my mom in particular. I was, in kindergarten, and then also with a nanny. And like, I was experiencing like kind of this dismantling of my family unit. And that is when my daughter turned that age, I started disassociating from my daughter. Like we'd play and I would just be like, I like would get sleepy and like couldn't be there. It was like really wild. And so I asked this woman, and it was, I think the sacred awareness is like, I think I told you, I started channeling like bits of information that only like she knows or she would know about her experience. And, she just went into tears and was like, yeah, I don't have a framework for what this looks like because I never got it from my mom. I said, yeah, you don't have a framework for what it is to sit around in your house and breastfeed all day and gaze into your child's eyes because you don't know what that feels like. You never received that. You were never on the receiving end. So how could you give it? And I know we have instinct as a mother to do it, but sometimes when we don't get it ourselves, how do we really know? And how do we, it's like the heart space is blocked in that way. So she titrated back into it. So I said, don't try to do it all at once. Just spend like a few minutes a day where you're really connecting and let your body and your nervous system bring that in. And then, maybe you need to put her down and walk away, and then you revisit it, and you can expand the amount of time you do it for longer and longer. And so, yeah, I think, it's a great opportunity to heal before you get pregnant. And if you don't have that luxury, that opportunity, I should say, to heal before you get pregnant, it's not linear. We're always healing. So it's like, if you're pregnant,
don't wait to get pregnant.
Like whenever you get the call to heal is the right time to heal. So if your kids are 10, if they're teenagers, if they've already moved out, they're in college, and like you didn't do this before you had kids, like, and you're hearing this now, like do it now.
Right.
Time is not linear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole premise of flower essences too, is you're healing, backwards and you're healing forwards, and it's all happening simultaneously. And you don't have to, like you say, you don't have to wait for anything. I always hear women say, I have to deal with whatever my childhood issues are when my child is that age. So like if my child is 5, then I'm dealing with whatever I went through when I was 5, and I'm healing that, which I find like, could there be a better design? I mean, that's just
so perfectly designed.
Fascinating.
And so if we look at that model and we imagine a woman who had a really traumatic birth and was really checked out and maybe drugged, I often see that being the case with my clients now who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to get the epidural, or they want to plan a C-section. And there is almost like this resistance to engaging in the birth itself because their mother didn't engage in the birth itself either.
Oh, interesting.
And so some of that work is like learning to trust this process. The body is intelligent. The body will heal itself. All you have to do is become aware of the issue, and then the body will start reorganizing itself.
Wow.
So sometimes we just talk about their own birth, and that's how a woman will break apart. So I wonder, like, I don't know which is the formula for like, is it fearlessness, right? Or full bloom? It's like fearlessness into gaining access into that. Are you just not being afraid to look into that abyss,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. Full bloom it's got that night blooming cactus flower that helps you just like take a huge leap in your growth potential versus like baby steps. Really helps you like cut through a whole load of limiting beliefs. I mean, that flower changed my business overnight.
Yeah.
Like, I went from seeing clients one-on-one for 10 years to getting like the biggest hotel, resort, spa contract job I could have ever dreamed of. And then like 4 months after opening was making custom gifts for, at the time, the president of the United States. It's just like, it was so surreal. It was so bizarre.
How were you taking it, if you don't mind me asking?
Well,
what do you like? Do you recommend? Sorry about that. What would you recommend to people? Like, maybe this is something you already talk about, but for whoever's listening now, like, you have the anointing oils, you have the mists, you have the elixirs. Like, how do would you tell a particular person, like, do the full bloom just with the anointing oil, but not the elixir? Or like, is it just like whatever is called, whatever?
Yeah, whatever you're called to use. I mean, some people are really into taking like herbs and tinctures, and they want to take supplements, and that kind of person is a really good fit for elixirs. Or they're like, I can't take that 5 times a day. Can I just put it in my water bottle and forget about it? because then every time you drink your water bottle, it's like a dose. So that works really well. Or like, I just put it in all my coffee, water, tea. It's just always in there. So there's that kind of person. And then, some people really just love like the sensuality of the scents. Like, I just want to mist myself and I want to put on the anointing oil and take a deep breath and smell the scents. And I love the way that XYZ smells, right? So then that's a better fit. Or like all the above.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's I gonna say? Something I've seen come up a lot lately is, so when you speak of like family stuff, there's like mother issues, I got not enough attention, I got too much attention, or there's father issues, he was really harsh, or he abandoned me when I was 1, or and all of these things I noticed play into, like, I've seen a number of my friends actually decide not to have children because they are terrified that their partner is going to leave once they have the baby because of their past experiences.
Yeah.
And literally block them from wanting to have children, or from being able to conceive, or from, it's just miscarriage after miscarriage. So what do you do in those cases? And do you see that very often?
Yeah. So I always, if it's possible for them, I always ask them to speak to their mother about what was going on for her while she was pregnant. Like, it's a pretty straightforward assignment, and it's, and what can get uncovered there is like so incredibly valuable, because a lot of people say, oh, my mom's already told me she went into labor, it was a fast labor. And I said, no, I didn't ask you about the birth. What was her daily life like when she was pregnant with you? What was she up to? What was going on with her and your dad? And they're like, oh, I don't know, let me ask her, and then they'll come back a week later, 2 weeks later for a follow-up session. And they're like, oh, my mom told me this, and she was actually incredibly anxious, and she was fighting with her mother-in-law a lot, and And then my dad actually, left for a few weeks, and, she was alone. So then all this, stuff starts to surface, and then they'll see like, oh, these are not my fears. These belong to my mom, and maybe my partner isn't going to do this to me. Maybe this is not my story, or maybe I'm creating this. Maybe this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, maybe I've selected a partner who will actually do this to me because this is how my nervous system knows how to handle trauma. So if someone's going to leave me, then it confirms my story and my suspicions. So I've chosen a partner who doesn't feel safe. Right. So it's like the dominoes go. And so sometimes it's just about asking those questions. And I obviously don't have any sort of like framework where I'm like, okay, now it's these steps, and now we're going to do this. And now it's like, this is the path to sovereignty, is, just giving some prompts, and people have to kind of like follow the yellow brick road. You know what I mean? And they could stop at any point. But once you start to see that and feel that and that expansion, you want to keep going, because it feels good to remove that weight that you've been carrying for so long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the answers are always, if we just look back at what was going on with the women in our lineage when they were pregnant and what their experiences were like, but like really, like if you just ask them, if you can, if they're alive, or get stories from family members, you really start to see there was a different side. Because most of us don't really ask that question. Who like in high school, I was like, Mom, what was going on with you and Dad? Like, I didn't care. I didn't care until it was relevant. And so, yeah, there are some great prompts, really simple, straightforward prompts for getting to the core of why you're having those blocks to become pregnant, to give birth, to breastfeed, to be a mom, worthiness around being a mother. A lot of the worthiness around being a mother, women are like, don't feel that they're worthy, or they're scared they're not going to do a good job, or they're going to go hire a nanny right away before they've even given birth, because they're already assuming it's so much work and they're not going to be able to handle it. And I'm like, well, let's talk about your pregnancy history now, and then find out they've had 2 abortions. There's a lot of shame around it. So that shame about those abortions is creating this belief system that you're not worthy because you didn't keep those 2, and so you're not really worthy of this one. And so it's like it's a mess, right? So all we can do is integrate those lives and those decisions, and there's no shame, and like, this was all meant to happen this way for these reasons. And so there's some unbraiding that can happen, And that's what we do a lot of. And it's beautiful work to do before you give birth. Pregnancy is such a cauldron for this alchemy, and the baby can feel you doing all of that work, and it's really good. That's the kind of detox I like when you're pregnant.
It's so great. Huh. Wow. Yeah, it's so funny because it's all in the question, right? It's like asking the question, because I remember once getting this astrology session from this woman in Canada who's super intuitive, and she uses some kind of old school way to read your chart, and you have like the time you're born and where you're born and all this information you share, right, for your natal chart reading. And she was like, no, you were not born at that time. No, I can tell you this much. That is not your rising sign. No, because she said, because did you move away from your place of birth? And I was like, yeah. She's like, and you're taller and lighter hair versus like short with dark hair, right? Yeah. She said, it's impossible. You're not that rising sign. And then she was like, and I can't see your mother. What's your mother's birthday? Yeah, I can't see her in your chart. Let me dial it back a little bit. And she was like, nope, you're this rising. And I was like, existential crisis. I'm that.
Wait, I know? I'm so curious now.
Yeah, it's silly. I always thought I was a Taurus rising, and I'm an Aries rising, which it makes a lot more sense. I'm pretty impulsive and like just dive in, and I'm sure that helps me a lot with business, because I normally would be just like a wooey feely, touchy feely Pisces. But and then the interesting thing was, she said, well, why don't you ask your mom? So I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, what actually happened when I was born in? Because she had a C-section. So everything was planned. It was timed out. She knew when it was going to happen. And she said, oh, well, yeah, it was really touch and go for a while there because you didn't want to breathe. And they thought you weren't going to make it. So they were like doing all this stuff for you to breathe. And I thought, oh, yeah, they probably like put my birth time as the time when I finally was like, took a breath and decided to stay. And I probably came out a lot earlier than what they marked down on the certificate.
Yeah.
It's just a silly example.
They call time as soon as you're out of the mother. And so interesting.
Wow. It's a silly example, but it's perfectly attuned to what you said about if you don't ask the question, you would have no idea. And you just kind of make an assumption of what you thought happened. And that was that.
And we're so good as humans, at overlaying and kind of filling in the space where it's convenient for us, And so it's like the whole identity and universe is created to suit what would just feel best for our system.
Yeah, my mom had a C-section and they cut her open and they carried me out, and it was great. Right. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Yeah, we make up all these stories that we don't remember.
Right. Oh my God. Wow.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So is there, I'm actually very curious about this. Is there a formula that you have, or some sort of like ritual that you have for supporting the masculine and feminine polarity in a relationship?
Yes.
Like for both people, or?
Yes. Well, there's two different formulas. If it's like mother stuff, like mother, like, did my mom really love me? Did she give me enough attention? Was she kind of harsh? Do I really belong here? Am I going to be a good mother? Like those all kind of fall in line. It's rhododendron flower is like mothering flower. And that one is in a blend called Fierce Compassion. And then for the kind of masculine is it's redwood, the redwood tree. And it's
from the bark?
From the little baby shoots with all the energy in them.
Wow.
Yeah, and that blend is true strength. It's like it could be anything from like, my dad wasn't there. I don't know who my dad is. He left when I was 2. He was there, but he was really harsh, or he was there, but he was really avoidant, and I never really had a relationship with him, or whatever those things are. And none of this is to blame our parents, right? Like we chose who we came in with, and, we take full responsibility, but nonetheless, those experiences are still there and they affect us. I remember when we first came out with True Strength, I was like terrified to take it. It's the first blend that I myself was afraid to take.
Oh, you're
And,
like, I made it, but I don't know if I'm going to have a slice of that.
oh yeah, I would have a slice and then I would go through a healing crisis and I'm like, I can't take that. Then I would take a little more and I'd be like, terrible healing crisis. I'm not taking that. And so I just started taking it like once a day, real slow, until I felt like I could handle it. Just because sometimes these things are difficult, right? They're difficult to look at, and then all of a sudden this big healing crisis comes up and it's just like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Totally irrational. It has nothing to do with, or it blows things in our today world out of proportion because we're referencing that, whatever that thing was.
Yeah, whatever you're in the moment is getting blown out of proportion because it's being looked at through the lens of whatever happened, either 30 years ago in your lifetime or in someone else's lifetime, and you're still holding that lens up.
Right.
Wow. So would you say like you would recommend that in the dynamic, the masculine would take True Strength and the feminine would take the Fierce Compassion, just like as an exercise?
If it's like, I would see if you're drawn to Fierce Compassion or Luscious Embodiment, one of the two.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot. I mean, I work with couples a lot. Like my birth class is designed for the couple. Just, whether it's a woman and, maybe she's taking the class with her friend because she's not partnered, and the friend is going to be the one actually holding the masculine energy in the dynamic,
Yeah.
But it's for a partnership. So that's what the class is really for. And so I have a lot of couples come through, and I've just been curious about this with the flower remedies, because I see, even within the woman herself, just like sometimes the imbalance with the masculine and the feminine, and just being, hyper masculine out of necessity.
I would say, I would. Oh gosh. And then there's expansive presence. Can I tell you?
I don't know anything about it. I have to try it. I want it.
So what made me think of this is we work with one acupuncturist and traditional Chinese medicine doctor in Idaho, and she does a lot of women's work. Her name is Erin Borbet. And sometimes in Chinese medicine, they'll feel your pulses and they'll say that your polarities are flipped.
Okay.
And the way that she remedied that was she would either take expansive presence or True Strength and apply it to the pinky toe, to the pinky toes.
Okay.
And then your meridians would like flip back into balance. Yeah. And there are other ways to do it in Chinese medicine that are a little more intimate, let's call it. But that's like really simple. So, okay. So expansive presence. This is so perfect for us women when we're like, okay, some simple examples would be like, we're carrying like 8 bags of groceries and somebody's like, oh, let me help you. And it's like, no, I got it. Yeah, like we're such pros. Like we get the award for the 8 bags of groceries.
And the worst part is that the person walks away and it's like, fuck, I have to carry this shit by myself. Like,
Right.
but someone just offered you support. It's like so twisted. All right.
Yeah. And I find myself doing that a lot. Like just the other day, somebody was like, do you want me to water the jasmine plants? And I was like, no, I got it. And I stopped myself like a couple minutes later and said out loud, why am I refusing support and help? Yes. Thank you. Can you help me water the jasmine plants? Yes. So there are some flowers in expansive presence that turn up our ability to receive.
Yeah.
Yes, I will receive your help. Yes, I'll take you want to make me 10 gallons of chicken broth that I can put in my freezer for when after I give labor? Yes, I'll take it. Oh, you want to help me do my laundry for my babies? Yes. You want to clean my house? Yes. Like, yes, take it in,
I need this in stock. I need this in stock in my office ASAP.
And
wow.
And the weird thing is when I first started taking that remedy, all these men started showing up to help. And it's just like every day it was some other, man offering to help. And there's something, I think sometimes for women, that's even more challenging to receive support from men than women, there are other flowers in there that are like for being able to sit at the throne of your like queendom. And just own that. Sometimes it's so hard to do that, or like to be in the spotlight. What is it like to have a baby shower or to have your baby and everybody's like giving you attention and focus? Is that uncomfortable, or can you just like own it in that moment? Yes, I can be in the center of attention. It's my time. Some time later, it'll be someone else's time.
Yeah. For the next 20 years of your life. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why in the West and probably now in the East too, is like why did we get this idea that like we have to do it all and then we're somehow heroes?
Yeah, I mean, that's the feminist psyop, right? It's like the dismantling of the nuclear family. I've had many clients come to me over the years who, are just about to give birth, and they're trying to find ways to maximize what they're offering to the family, to their partner, to everybody. So they're hiring a nanny so that they can stay working and go back to work after 6 weeks. And they're creating all these formulas and manipulating the situation so that they stay worthy and valuable. And I always ask them, do you know where the belief came that your energy and attention to the family is less valuable than monetary input? Like, where does that come from? And they don't even realize that that's their belief system. I don't know if that's like a very American thing, because I can't speak for all of these other petri dishes around, across the world, but I will say that that's very common here. It's like, well, no, I mean, I ask women, do you need to work to survive, or is that something that your partner can do for the first 6 months or the first year? And they're like, oh no, we would be fine, but I can't just sit around all day. I'm like, sit around all day.
He's not sitting around all day.
So for them, hanging out with the child, breastfeeding, keeping the home is sitting around all day, because there is no monetary contribution. So that's where that's the most clear schism I can see. And I'm not saying that's every American woman, but it is probably 90% of the women that I have worked with over the last decade. They're on the spectrum of that belief system. Some it's more severe, others less.
Wow.
So I think that what did you say it was? Expansive awareness?
Expansive presence. Not expensive. Expand.
Right. So allowing us to be rooted in our role, taking on that queen role and just allowing ourselves to be rooted there and to really embody it and to receive, knowing that by receiving what your partner's offering, you're also giving to your partner in that receiving. As soon as you open up to receive, they're like, wow, all of this work that I do is now worth it because she's actually receiving it. And that's really what they're doing it for.
They feel valued, they feel seen, they feel like they contributed, they protected. Yeah.
So we just have this misconception that receiving means we're selfish, but when we receive, we're actually giving. That's like the other person really feels that.
It's interesting, when one of the flowers in that blend is the night blooming red cup water lily, and it is I collected it in Florida.
Wow. And
it is the first time that I needed someone to help me collect a flower essence, and it was a man, because it was growing in this pond and there were water moccasins and possible alligators and all kinds of weird stuff that I'm not prepared for. But this gentleman was, really versed at water lilies, and he put on these like tall waders and went in, and I told him, this is what you do, ask permission and make an offering and make a big, really vast wish that this is going to help lots of people, and ask which one to cut. And then, I gave him all these instructions, and he was so sweet the way that he did it. And I couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah.
But
Perfect.
but it was in service to me and my work. So it was this kind of strange, and the flower is like, well, so many of the kind of religious, spiritual lineages, the leaders have been men. And so this particular flower is showing us how women of this new age can become, in a sense, like spiritual leaders. We can embody our full spiritual potential as spiritual beings. And part of that is allowing men to help us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about extracting them from the equation or the field, which is the very common misconception. I can only be this if they're removed. And that's where we're all just falling apart.
Right.
Wow, I love that. Okay. I'm so eager to try it.
I mean, speaking of roles, like how do you typically only work with mom, or do you also work with dads?
I do work with the men and with the masculine, but not really one-on-one. So it's something that, if they need additional support, they may come to me, but it's not something that I really put a lot of intention out for. The work that I do is like really for them, with them, and then additional work might just be with the woman. But so many of them have reached out over the years after the birth or in postpartum and really just said like, wow, learning from you in this process. And I've gotten closer to my wife, my partner. I found my role in this constellation. I found my role in this family simply by learning how to hold space differently. And all I did was just like invite them to hold space differently for the woman. And I invited her to receive and surrender. And how powerful it is for the masculine when she can just receive and surrender. And then he, like, his whole world opens up. So it's not like I could just do something for the man and the whole dynamic's going to change. It's like they both have to, he has to become more assertive and she has to become more receptive.
Tell me more about receiving and surrendering. Tell us more. What do you mean?
So when we can identify, like I mentioned earlier, when we can identify what it is, what we want, we then ask for it in whatever way. So an exercise that I've had couples do when we're working together in person is I'll just ask them, it's an exercise from Betty Martin, who's actually a chiropractor on the West Coast. She's old school, and she wrote a book, The Art of Giving and Receiving. And basically I'll ask the man to grab the woman's hand, and he'll ask her, how would you like me to touch your hand? And the timer will go for 3 minutes. So just tell me how you'd like me to touch your hand, what you'd like me to do. And women are usually like, oh, I don't know, like, I guess like maybe do this. And like, she'll kind of grab his hand and show him, rather than saying like, I don't know, just do some light feather touch and let's see how that feels. And I'll tell you if I like it or I don't. Right. She'll just kind of, she can't even vocalize or acknowledge or see what it is, what would feel good. So sometimes women will even ask, I don't know, just like do whatever you want, And so in that simple exercise, we can kind of see how difficult it is for a woman. Some women are like, oh yeah, do that thing you usually do before we go to bed. And she knows, right? But not often. And so, it's a way for her to start to say, okay, like, the light feather touch. Oh, that feels good. Oh, how does it feel on the back of your hand instead of the inside of your hand? How does it feel when I go to the tips of your fingers? How does it feel when I do like a pinch and a twist? And so I'll have them explore just touch in the hand, and she'll
that's crazy.
Lead him. And sometimes people just like have breakthroughs from doing that together. And like, he's like, oh, you've never told me that before. She's like, well, you've never asked. And they kind of break through some things there. And it's so simple, and so what she's done there is she's acknowledged what it is, would feel good to her. She's vocalized it, and then she's allowing herself to receive, and she's giving him an opportunity to succeed.
Wow, that's crazy.
So,
it's like men just really just want to know what women want so they can please them, but then it's just so hard for women to specify. I mean, to even, like you said, to articulate it with words is like,
and
whoa.
like Have you noticed, like, as a woman, or maybe not, but like I've noticed with women, it's like we can get so detailed about exactly the things that we want and the way we want to be touched and what it smells like in the room and the music that's playing. And we say it to our girlfriends and we write it in our journals. And then when the man comes and he's like, well, what do you want? She's like, whatever. I don't know. What do you want? And so it's like, yes, men can lead, but like he's here to serve you. So tell him exactly what you want, and then he'll lead you into whatever that space is, right? So it's not, they're not mind readers. We're not mind readers. Maybe some of us are, but for the most part, we're not. So yeah, that's what I mean about receiving and surrendering is you in order to receive and surrender, you first have to get clear on what you want and what feels good. And then you build that trust, and then you can receive, and then you'll be led, and then you can relax. And so in birth, when women are holding that masculine space of like, oh, this has to be like that, and I have to be advocating for myself because I'm going to the hospital and I have to tell the nurse not to do this, and I have to do my birth plan. It's like, you can't be holding that masculine space of your own container while you're trying to surrender. So that's why there needs to always be a masculine counterpart in the birth space. And that's like where I come in as the doula. I'll assume that masculine space and containment. You have to be able to turn that on and off as a being. And so when there is no partner, or if the man is not showing up in that way, or he doesn't know how, or doesn't want to, or whatever it is, I can kind of hold that space. And that's really why we hire doulas. So when we have these really like hyper feminized doulas that are not offering that grounding and that containment, it's kind of like,
I was really surprised because some years back, I realized I spoke to a midwife and she was like, oh yeah, we're not there for the mother. We're there for the baby. She said, if you want someone to be there for the mother, that's the doula. That's the doula's job. We're just there for the baby. That's it.
Yeah, they're medical. Yeah. For the most part, they're just making sure these are unfolding. Yeah. Yeah. Women have a lot of misconceptions about midwives. They're like, oh, I'm hiring a midwife. I'm going to automatically have this like blissful natural birth. It's going to go like this. And it might, but they're also really just there as medical professionals, making sure that things are unfolding in a certain way and keeping things in order, so to speak. So yeah, it's not the midwife, the doula, but also your partner, if they want to show up that way.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? That in the sort of Western allopathic model, the partner is sort of kicked to the side. And then what? The doctor is supposed to fulfill that role, but doesn't. Like,
well, yeah, doesn't.
You compare it to like, I remember when I was in Chiapas in Mexico, I went to this like indigenous herbal center, and they had, all kinds of incredible herbs that they use in that region, and photographs and kind of like mannequins showing how the indigenous people of that area gave birth. And it was so cool because their style was, they had a couple different styles, but one, like the woman would grab her arms around the neck of her partner and just kind of hang and squat. And then, and then the midwife would catch the baby out the back.
Yes.
She was like front facing her partner for support. And then the baby would come out the back. And there were a couple of different ways, but I thought, wow, that's like, the man is like structurally the framework for allowing that kid to come out.
Totally. It's beautiful. I've seen births like that. And that is, if we look at Native American depictions as well, like across the United States, east to west, north to south, that is one of the main birthing positions, as well as either hanging on a branch like that, or hanging on the husband, the father. And the midwife or the attendant is catching the baby, it's one of the best ways to do it. It's kind of like the path of least resistance. But we just have to remember that for the last, 80 years, we've been birthing in hospitals, and Hollywood has kind of like repositioned itself to support this, this framework that birth is an emergency. It needs to be highly controlled. and it needs to look a certain way, and the husband is kind of out here, and the doctor is really involved and making sure that everything stays safe, and he becomes the container, but not really, because there's a vested interest that they have as an institution.
Right.
And what I see happen a lot when women feel overrun and blindsided by that system and by the doctor, and the doctor has his hands here and there and pulling things open, cutting things, then the woman afterwards has this like subterranean resentment and belief system towards her man, you know, towards the father, for like not protecting her and like not standing up for her. And on the surface, everything looked fine, right? We ended up with a healthy baby. I'm alive. The baby's alive.
Oh God, that's heartbreaking. I can totally understand how that could happen.
Like everything's fine. We're all here, you know. And
But
then
I
like
just went through this traumatic thing, and why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you?
because
Oh,
everybody in the room is like, this is where we're supposed to be. I'm supposed to trust this man who we don't even know to do the right thing and like keep us safe or whatever. So yeah, I mean, a lot of
weird,
relationships.
isn't it? The system is just so contra natural.
Yeah, it's super weird, and it creates a lot of ripple effects in our energetic field, with our partner, with our family, within ourselves. And it's like we end up in these loops, you know, and we don't know why the relationship falls apart after the birth, and we don't know, like, understand. And it's like so much of our inability to breastfeed, our inability to communicate, our inability to reconnect with our partner has to do with the traumatic birth. And then people gaslight themselves and they say, well, I'm alive, the baby's alive, I shouldn't be complaining. But I just don't know why I feel so squeamish every time I think of my birth. I just don't know why I feel so sad and I want to cry every time I think of my birth. Like, everyone's healthy. So it's like we gaslight ourselves into believing that that's good enough, that everyone's alive. Everyone came out breathing, so it's good enough. You know?
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Well, and can put yourself in the men's shoes too. Like that's pretty disempowering for the father, you know,
Totally.
because in other circumstances, the father is like one of the main players and created the child and will raise the child. So it seems odd to have some other guy come in the room and do a bunch of invasive stuff at some point. You know, why not? Why
And I
not
don't, I
have
don't, I don't personally believe that men should be practicing midwifery or birth or maternity care, but that's just my humble opinion.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if I were the father, it would be so cool for me to be an integral part of it versus just kind of onlooking and powerless and unable to really protect my partner
Yeah, of course, of course.
and baby.
And yeah, and that's really where he goes through his rite of passage, right? So it is deeply spiritual and emotional for the father as well. He's having his birth experience. And I don't want to downplay that ever, you know, but they're not even given that stage to experience that. And what better way to experience that rite of passage than being given a role that's vital and integral, you know, in the birth process. Doesn't have to be catching the baby, you know, it's an energetic space holding that happens. It's like an advocacy that happens. It's a role that's given. And most men are like, yeah. In the beginning of my career, I would go to births, and like, it was before I was really heavily into education, and I would work with couples, and the guy was like, you know, on Netflix on his phone on the couch, and, you know, she's like laboring in the other room, but I would just be like, oh my God, you know. And that's when I made a rule early on, like, we're not working together unless you've taken a class with me, because I can't walk into these like completely, I don't know, these energetic fields that were just like so disparate, like where the people were so disconnected from each other.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, because you think like men are so good at like that framework holding,
Right.
then women can just like be spacious and take up all the space.
Yeah,
and
totally.
expand and do what they need to do.
Yeah. And so I guess if she's able to allow that, to receive that role herself, then that would make all the difference too, you know, that expansive consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see how that would also play out in just like very simple relationships as well.
Totally, totally. Yeah, this is just kind of like a droplet of the bigger picture, you know, how the birth dynamic is for me is pretty representative of how these two human beings function together in relationship and then also individually. You know?
Okay, one flower essence blend comes to mind. Have you worked with open heart?
Yes, I had the anointing oil. Yeah.
Curiosity, vulnerability, being open, listening to the other person.
Mhm.
It's not always easy to do that.
Would you say that's a good like that's a good formula to work with? Just like day to day or right before an expression or right before going into something or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. It helps us put ourselves in other people's shoes, and it helps us not be afraid of emotions from other people and our own, and not be afraid of connection. You know, so many of us are like, I want to feel more connection. I feel so lonely. I feel so separate. I want to feel more connected. I want more intimacy. But then when it happens, it's like, oh, scary as shit sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I have a question about infinite love. What like for me it's like everyone should be taking that every day, right? But what would you say is like the specific, like the acute, what's like the acute sensation for that, or the acute block for that?
Irritable.
Mm.
I give all my attention and energy and love to other people, and I don't like, oh, self-care for me, you know. Old
Okay.
kind of resentments, bitterness, like I'm unable to forgive either myself or someone else for something, like old bad memories.
Yeah.
Able to take the edge off of that.
Yeah.
Fully loving and accepting every part of yourself, and therefore being okay being seen and heard because you've fully accepted yourself. And then one last little piece, which I think is so important, is there's a flower in there for yeah, you know, those times when we feel like a little bit needy, like, oh, I just want some affection. Oh, could someone just like come and snuggle me? Like, someone could just like rub my feet. You know, we want that comfort and the affection and the love and the attention. So what it does is it helps us not need any love from the outside.
Yeah.
Fully like fall in love with ourselves so we don't need anything from out there. And then lo and behold, it makes us incredibly sexy because we're self-sufficient, so that attracts love.
Wow. Like shopping cart, put it in.
Yeah. Or I mean, even just like teenagers, you know,
Yeah.
when they go through that period where they're just like cranky and hormonal and like nobody understands me and angry. Or even, you know, a long time ago, I had a client who said, my daughter is, you know, 4 or 5, and suddenly she's saying to me, I hate you. I hate you. Where did she get that from? You know, and then so we gave her infinite love. And then a week or two later, it was like gone and all warm and fuzzy. And I love mommy. And
Mm.
yeah.
Wow. Wow. It made me think, yeah. Now that we're in the realm of children, that's a whole other conversation.
Oh, I know. Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should take infinite love at least once in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Because we're so damn hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We really are.
Yeah.
Really just brings in a level of softness that everybody really ultimately wants.
Absolutely.
We'll probably talk all day, but let's see.
No.
We can do a part 2. This is probably good for part 1, right?
We can do part 2. I know. I'm already thinking like, oh, postpartum, and no, but there's already like a whole arsenal here, I think, for women to refer to, you know. So I think we're all in the same path. We're just all in a different part of the spectrum, you know, when we're moving forward with these rites of passage, and we all hit these blocks in some regard, you know, depending on the season we're in our lives. We don't have to all have the same background or the same belief system, but we all seem to have these universal blocks, you
For
know.
sure. For sure.
come and go. So yeah, well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, if there are any sort of like prompts that you have written that you'd want to share, if there's like 3 or 4 questions, or something that you feel like even for women who are not looking to get pregnant, just like some prompts that you might want to ask yourself. I think that would be really interesting if you have anything to share.
Yeah, I do actually. So I would start to notice, like, when you're in a challenging dynamic or having an experience or something doesn't feel quite right to you, what is the way that you move through it? Because what I hear a lot of is the phrase, I'll just power through. I don't really like it, but I'll just power through. And so for me, that's obviously like not having a boundary, right? Where it's like something just doesn't feel good. So, I'm just not going to do it today, right? Or I'm going to let them know I'll do it at a time when it feels right. So I would just invite everyone to start noticing when our body speaks to us, what is the phrase that we use or we express to redirect our body so that we can just keep going? Because often our body.
I'll just endure this.
What?
I'll just endure this.
Yeah, I'll just get through it. Oh, just this one time. I only have to do this once a week. So, or I'll just power through. I know, but she needs it more than I do. So I just, so notice the times when our body is trying to speak to us, and what is the phrase that we're giving our body to what I call, self-betray. And that's the first step. And so then next time this comes up, I would invite you all to ask your body, okay, what is it that you want right now? Like, what is the most outrageous thing that we want right now? If we had the choice. Oh, I just wouldn't go. I just wouldn't even call. I just would stay in my house. And I'd go and make dinner and watch my favorite show, read my book, and I'd go to bed. And I wouldn't let anybody know that I wasn't showing up. So think about the most outrageous thing that you would do in that situation, and see how your body feels when you give it that opportunity to experience choosing yourself, choosing your body, and try it. And it might not be like cutting it out completely. It might be titrating, but I just think this is a great exercise to just start noticing when your body speaks to you, what is the phrase that you're saying to redirect it? Notice it enough times. And then when it starts to come up, your body speaks to you, try to give it a different prompt. Ask it, what does it want? And then see if you can follow that lead. So I would say that's a great place to start, no matter where you are in your journey, like preconception, you're pregnant, you're getting ready for your birth, because the body is really the one that we should be listening to. That's where all of the wisdom is, and it's trying to speak to us. And disease and all kinds of things can start to happen when we're betraying over and over and over again. So yeah, do for you. And when you do for you, you can give from a place of more infinite energy and wisdom.
Last question. What are the most common types of self-betrayal that you see?
The most common types of self-betrayal are being in situations where we don't want to be, like physically and energetically. That's the most common thing that I see, is like, we don't really want to be at in a certain group or at a gathering, but we go out of obligation because the option of not going would, I don't know, it would ostracize us from the group, from the pack, from whatever it is. It would make us look a certain way. And so we put ourselves physically and energetically into things that we just don't want to be in, And in my work, the most common thing I see is women settling for a birth experience to appease either her husband, her mother, or even her doctor, who she wants deep, deep approval from, because we parentify doctors and medical staff. Like, mommy, see me, daddy, see me. And so we assign the doctor, the medical staff, with that role. And so, yeah, I'll do that. I'll show up to the ultrasound. I'll do the things that I don't want to do. And
I'll be a good girl.
Be a good girl. Just be agreeable. And so then women end up, the most common type of self-betrayal in this field with birth is settling for a type of birth that you don't want for other people.
Shit, that's painful.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, again, just like coming back to that example of the TSA security, it's like, if the prompt that you have is so good, because if we can practice now, then when it really matters, whether we're birthing, we're caretaking someone we love who's dying or sick, or some kind of more critical moment, we've already developed the skill to know what we want and how we want it, and be able to like face the consequences of being able to say what we want.
Yeah. And the more you do this, you're going to start to be able to fine tune how fast it happens. Because at first you might stand there and be like, okay, my body's telling me not to go there. You might stand there for 5 minutes and being like, well, I should go. But my body's saying, the more you practice this, that space between feeling it and deciding is going to get smaller and smaller, but it just takes practice.
Wow, I love it. Thank you so much. Really, really, really appreciate your time, Eyla.
I appreciate your time. This has been so illuminating. I'm like so excited to share this with so many people who I know are just like wanting the allies.
Yeah.
In their
We need
process.
all the support we can get.
Yeah.
And the flowers are so gentle and so subtle and so sweet.
And very profound. Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.